Esperanza Rising. Background knowledge. A review of the novel Esperanza Rising. The New York Times said, children and students worldwide will relate to the story of Esperanza and her family. The mixing of cultures as Esperanza and her family adjust to California shows us the lives of many immigrants in the 1930s, while also exploring an often ignored aspect of the era. With historical relevance and modern suspense, Esperanza Rising is a book that will engage young and old alike. Pam Munoz Ryan, the author, talking about the inspiration for her novel Esperanza Rising.
Esperanza begins as a very sort of pampered and spoiled daughter of a landowner in Aguascalientes, Mexico, and she has a very privileged life. She has servants, and she goes to private schools, and she really has never known any other way to live. She comes from a very loving family, but a series of circumstances happen, and her father is killed, and she must flee to the United States with her mother. And she, sort of accepts that on face value, but she doesn't really realize what's going to happen to her, or where she's going, or the change of station that's going to occur for her in her life. And so they make this journey. They end up in De Giorgio Farms in the San Joaquin Valley, living in a farm labor camp and having to share a very tiny cabin with a number of people. And the story shows her evolution and how she grows into being, or actually how she was forced to grow into an independent young woman.
Now that you have learned a little bit about the author of Esperanza Rising, let's take a look at a video about the Great Depression, a time period in America in the 1930s that strongly affected jobs, banks, farmers, and the entire American economy.
The Great Depression was a dramatic worldwide economic calamity which started in 1929 and lasted until the late 30s. Most people believe it began with the U.S. stock market collapse of October 1929. By 1932, U.S. stocks were only worth 20% of what they were prior to the crisis, and 1 year later, almost half of all United States banks had failed. By 1935, roughly 750,000 farms had been lost to bankruptcy or distressed sales. European countries, debilitated by the debt they've accumulated due to World War I, dealt with a severe depression, and a sovereign debt crisis ultimately emerged. In Germany, for example, unemployment reached 25%, and among other things, this economic disaster led to Hitler's Nazi Party becoming the top political actor after the 1932 elections. Worldwide trade was devastated by the Great Depression, with countries engaging in so-called trade wars by limiting imports, and by the same year 1932, global trade crashed to half of the pre-crisis volume. Unfortunately, trade wars degenerated into an actual armed conflict, which caused over 60 million deaths. World War II. Make no mistake, most wars have been caused by economic factors to a very large degree. Let's learn from the past and not let this happen again.
It's time for me to get
Mexico in the 1930s. The Great Depression was not an American problem. Many Mexican citizens wanted to leave the country to find better opportunities. There is a long history of Mexican immigrants coming into America. Many Mexican Americans were forced to return to Mexico, as well as those people who had come from Mexico. Mexico did not want deportees or people who were forced out of a country. California in the 1930s. The hard time contributed to racism. Authorities shipped thousands of Mexican deportees across the border, resulting in severe racism against Mexicans. Thousands of people without jobs, unemployed people, lived in makeshift or homemade homes like tents. California did not like foreigners or people from other countries or states. The Bracero program was an agreement between the U.S. and Mexican governments that permitted Mexican citizens to take temporary agricultural work in the United States. Here are some signs explaining how people in California in the 1930s viewed Mexican Americans and Filipinos. Why does this matter today? We are facing the same problems when it comes to immigration today. Today, there are still many poor people and not a lot of rich people. Many people from Mexico or other Latin countries come to America for a better life, or they send their children to America for a better life. Some Americans support deportation, which is forcefully removing people from the country. We must remember to maintain our humanity.